Hey ladies, nice to see you. I hope you're well in this big world. I'm crooked here. Let me fix my shirt. this week, it's a big week. Yeah. I hope you're taking very good care of your heart and your space, your emotional state. For those of you who follow what I write a lot about owning your own emotional state. Because if you don't own your emotional state, someone else will. And there are a lot of things to hook us right now. World events, global events, community events, national events, and all of those things can hook your emotional state. And when you're hooked, then you start spinning and reacting to it. And you just lost your power. You lost your sovereignty. You lost your liberation and your freedom because you gave something or someone else your emotional state. This is actually not what I was going to talk about today, but I guess we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about the thing I was going to talk about because it's relevant, right? What's happening in our world politically is totally relevant to relationship and marriage. Whether you're married or not, if you're in any relationship with any human being, whether it's your parents or your children or a neighbor or a best friend or a lover, it doesn't matter, right? Those systems give us an opportunity to see what's going on inside of us, right? That's what they do. And they show up for us parts of ourselves that we maybe don't want to see, and often in a love relationship, what is shown up are things that we would rather not look at. And it's the same with things sort of that are happening politically right now, right? The feelings of being out of control or anxious, depressed, scared, all of that is totally normal. And so I wrote something yesterday, the day before, so read through the feed if you're interested, about it being important to learn how to feel your feelings. Feeling your feelings matters, right? Like we have to feel our feelings and move them, dance them, write them, do art with them, take a power walk up a hill, go swim in a body of water, do what you need to do to feel it, express it, journal it, get it out, move it. Yes, yes, yes. So yes, feel your feelings. And then decide what kind of emotional state you want to choose to broadcast, what kind of emotional state you want to choose to marinate yourself in. Because when we don't actually feel our feelings, what we do is we harbor it, right? We dock in it, we camp out in it, and then we have a thought about it, how it's never going to change, and then it kicks it up again, and then another thought, it's always going to be like this, and then it kicks it up again. And now we're in a state of heightened arousal for a very, very long time. And many of us, and those of you women, and I know there are so many of you in here who've been told that you are depleted, you have adrenal fatigue, right? Part of how it is that happens is we're in a heightened state of arousal, right? This fight or flight arousal for days, weeks, months, years. And we're not meant to do that. And so the growth process includes how to feel the depth of everything that you're feeling while anchoring yourself. Anchoring yourself into a practice. Anchoring yourself into that which is bigger than you, if that's part of your experience of life. Anchoring yourself in something, right? Just like a boat that's on a body of water, it anchors down into something that's solid so that the winds and the storms don't just fly the boat all around, right? Hope you're following me there. So, yeah, so anchor. And if you don't know how to anchor, learn how to anchor. And if you want to talk to me about that, send me a private message, read all of everything that I write here is about those kinds of things, so you can read about it. What I wanted to talk about today is identity, but let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Jenny Glick. I host this space here. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist. And I work now not traditionally as a therapist because I've discovered something, I've created something that works really, really well for women who are stuck in a pattern in their relationship. And I developed this after working clinically and professionally with women and families and couples and children for almost 20 years. And seeing that for this particular population who I work with, there was something that worked better. And that something is what I'm going to talk about right now, which is identity work. And I'm writing a post about this, which I will share in my feed tomorrow as well. So those of you who prefer to read, it's going to be in there as well. But I wanted to share this with you because we had our group call today. I do an 8-week program and we do 2 calls a week. I think of them as like office hours and where I'm available to answer questions. And so the phone lines are open, and I had this really beautiful, intimate call today with 3 of my participants in my 8-week space. And it struck me how it is, you know, and they talked about, 2 of the women were talking about how they've made such tremendous change. They're both 5-6 weeks in, and how they look back at who they were, you know, a month and a half ago. And one of the women said, I can't even imagine being that person anymore. It makes me sick to my stomach. And I hear this all the time. You can, I think I've posted, you know, in the videos section here in this Facebook group. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can go into my Facebook group. I'll put a link here in the comments below. And I've interviewed a lot of women who I've worked with over the years. And so you can hear them say, I mean, I hear this almost every day. Like I hear it all the time, that the change is profound in such a short time. And it's not like a sales pitch, like it's real. And the reason why it's real is because what we're doing is identity work. And I wanted to describe to you what that is in here so that you know what it is, because it works. So if you want to change your life or your situation, there are 2 things that you're going to be tackling. One is strategy. And strategy is like, you know, as it pertains to couples work, it's like having a conversation, active listening, having a date night, talking about your love language, holding hands more, you know, those kinds of things. It's the structure, and that's good, but it's only in reality about 20% of it. It's only 20%. And you can pick up a book, you can read a blog, you can do all kinds of things to find strategy. There are great strategies out there. The problem is, if you do your strategy with an old identity, it won't work. It won't work. And here's why. Because your identity is the energy with which you show up to do something. It includes your beliefs, your narratives, your thinking, your feeling, the meaning you put on things, right? It's a complex constellation of experiences that you have that are very specific to you. So I'm going to give you an example. If I'm in my old identity, those of you who've been in here a while know I call that your 1.0. I try to keep it really simple. So most women come to me in their 1.0 identity, where they feel maybe rejected by their partner, or they don't feel good enough, or they are resentful. They haven't had intimacy in a long time. And that 1.0 identity comes with a constellation of beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not safe, right? And those beliefs are things that you probably have tackled. You know, many of you in here have been to therapy of some kind, you know, some kind of yoga retreat, or have done past life regressions or hypnosis, or worked with a rabbi or a minister or a holy person or a sweat lodge. Like you know, this group is a sophisticated, what I like to think of as a sophisticated group of women. And so you have some insight. This is not brand new to you, right? And so that identity that you show up with, right? It's a lot of it is what you've come to know about yourself through things like therapy, where you're like, yeah, I don't have a sense of safety because my father was an alcoholic and we never knew when he was going to come home. And so I never felt super safe. And then I act that out sometimes in my relationship with my partner. And if my partner comes home late, it pushes on that trigger, right? Like, you all know that. That's not complicated. You understand that, right? The thing is most people will just live there and recognize, okay, that's my trigger. Therefore, I have to educate my partner to not come home late so that you don't touch that trigger, because then that trigger will go off and I will have to deal with those feelings, and I don't want to deal with those feelings. And so we negotiate the strategy around that experience. Is this making sense to you? Okay. What I do is different, because I take women, maybe like you, who understand that. They know. Women show up with me and they're like, I know I have PTSD. I know I have, a tendency towards depression. I know I have whatever the thing is. I know, my parent neglected me, or my first partner was abusive, like whatever their constellation of their situation is, they know that they're there. My job is to help them create a new identity. Their new identity is over here. We call that your 2.0 identity, right? And whether you are currently in a marriage, whether you're separated, I have a couple of women in separation situation right now. I work with women sometimes who are divorced. Either, any of those scenarios are such that if you know you're stuck in your 1.0 identity and you want to be in your 2.0 identity, it requires you to create a new constellation of beliefs, feelings, thinking patterns, narratives, a whole new neurological system that will fire and wire new experiences together. And that new system requires that you have new beliefs, okay? So an old belief is, I am not safe because my dad didn't come home when I was a kid, and now I project that onto my partner. That's like old, right? The new belief is learning how to find safety, not in whether or not your partner comes home, right? But finding safety in yourself, that you show up for yourself. I wrote something recently about how it is that often we're liable to abandon ourselves, right? Women are really good at abandoning themselves. They're really good at putting everybody else before themselves. They're really good, some women, at not setting really good boundaries, which is a way of abandoning yourself. And then when you don't set boundaries, you've abandoned yourself. But in the 1.0 identity, how that comes out is being angry at your partner because you feel like you can't trust them, right? Which is very different than recognizing in your up-leveled identity that I actually can show up for myself every single day. And there are all kinds of ways we can do that. And that's what I do when I work with women over 2 months, is we craft and create, and they practice every single day. One of the women in my space, I said to her, it's like you have all these little tiny notes from me that I've tucked in your brain over the last, 5 weeks that we've been together. And she's opening all these little notes, from all the training that she's done and the modules that she's watched and the, dozen calls she's been on with me and the private calls she's been on and being in the Facebook group, like all the things that we've done together. So now it's becoming second nature. It's second nature to trust that she's safe. It's second nature for her to learn how to ask herself questions. I teach women how to use what I think of as powerful questions. Powerful questions take you into the higher version of you. Crappy questions take you into the crappy version of you. Why does this always happen to me? How come it can't be easier? Nothing ever goes my way. Why doesn't he ever listen? How come she doesn't love me? Right? That takes you into your old identity. Powerful questions. What do I need to do to stay resolutely committed to loving myself? That's a powerful question, and that's going to take you somewhere different than back in that place, right? But that's a practice. Most of us don't have that practice. Most of us have this practice of like, yeah, but how come? And you can feel the energy, right? Even as I say that, it's a different energy. It pulls you into your old identity. And in that identity, the old identity, the strategy is not gonna work. It's just not. It can't work. In a different identity, what happens is you start seeing the world differently. One of the women in my space right now is her partner is moving out. They're having a conversation about him getting an apartment. And it just, here's how amazing, right, she is, this woman, because she's so committed to herself and to this practice that she is able to sit at the kitchen table with her partner and have this really calm and curious conversation that includes being really vulnerable about things that are going on and really accepting about what's going on with him. When 6 weeks ago, she was like, oh my gosh, no way. I cannot believe he wants to leave. This is like ripping my heart out, right? She's in such a different place because she's in a different identity. And sure, I gave her some strategy to do during the conversation and said, pull out a piece of paper, do this, draw these circles, do this thing. So she did the strategy, but without the up-leveled identity, right? She'd be back in this old place of feeling resentful and hurt and, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do without him? And how's this gonna go? And asking herself all of those questions on repeat, right? And so then the strategy, which is a good strategy, but if you use it in the old identity, not gonna work. In her new 2.0 identity, I mean, it blew my mind, though it doesn't surprise me because this is what happens. It's just what happens. It's what happens when a woman shows up every single day and decides she's going to love herself enough to no longer park in an identity that has become toxic to her and possibly to her partner. And she decides to take that walk across here, and I have the map. And so it's simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, you know, and it's not easy because it invites us to look at parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. And we all go through this. This is called development. This is growth. I do it too. I have different mentors who I'm always working with, right? Because yeah, now I'm on my 2.0, 4.0, whatever development stage I am, but there's more, right? And that's the great get to of life, is that we get to keep growing. We get to, for some of us, want to be better versions. And we're given so many opportunities to do that. We're given that opportunity right now politically. And so if you're not doing identity work, which will mean that you're being super aware of how you're thinking and feeling and what you're practicing and what beliefs you're toggling back to, right? Another woman who I'm working with right now, who is on our call today, you know, we were talking about some of her core beliefs that keep her in her 1.0, right? And as we were able to shift some of those core beliefs around her sense of safety and not valuing herself, right? And of course, that sense of not valuing herself, where does that come up? It comes up when she was talking about her partner and saying, I feel like my partner doesn't desire me. So my question was, oh, where do you not desire yourself? And how do we do self-desire? To desire yourself means to set boundaries, means to make yourself a priority. It means how it is that you talk to yourself when you glance yourself in the mirror. If you're kind and loving and compassionate with yourself, that's self-love. That's desiring yourself, right? When I don't desire myself, when I'm hard on myself, when I neglect myself, I put myself last. I don't take care of my needs. I ignore my health until my illness demands that I gotta show up because I have no choice, right? And so the woman who I'm working with, her invitation was, okay, if we're going to change that belief, if we're going to shift that around rather than, I'm afraid my partner doesn't desire me, like your 2.0 version is really looking at how is it that you can practice loving yourself. Who's that lady? Who's the lady who wakes up in the morning and prioritizes herself? Because as you embody the change, right? And you practice it, you become it. And as you become it, you're not looking outside of yourself for it. And then you just get to share this up-leveled experience of more ease and joy and curiosity and kindness with your partner, right? It sounds simple. And if you follow the steps, it is simple. For those of us who need accountability, which are usually the women who show up and want to work with me because they want it now, right? They're like, let's do this. And they also want to have the community. And one of the things I love about being able to do this in this way, which is so different than therapy, is that I get to have contact for 2 months with all the women who I work with. And then I have this beautiful graduate space where we have almost 100 graduates who are in there now. And I do a free training in that space. And those women, I get to hear what's happening with them and I get to see what's going on. And they continue to grow this up-leveled identity musculature, and they have a community that speaks the same language. And they're women who are so resolutely committed to their own betterment, not even betterment, because it's not like there's anything wrong with living in your 1.0. It's just a choice to do something else, right? It's a choice to get sober from your addictive patterns that have kept you stuck. And so there's a reason why people who are sober hang out together, because it's like, you're sober too, you're doing the good work too, that's awesome. Let me celebrate with you how this is trickling down to my kids. Let me tell you how I heard my kid doing something that was so mind-blowing at 6, 8, 9, 12, right? That they're embodying their up-leveled identity too. And that's how the change happens. That's the ripple of impact, right? It's why I work with women, because women have people around them, right? Partners, community, children. And when you go from your 1.0 identity, where you're marinating in self-loathing, I talk a lot lately about self-terrorizing. We terrorize ourselves with fear, with anxiety, with worry. And I talk about that, like you lock yourself in a movie theater with a horror movie going and your heart is pounding and you're like, oh my gosh, and the door's right there, you could get out, right? But it requires you to love yourself enough to say, I don't want to do this anymore. There's got to be something else. And there is. There's totally something else. And when you see it and recognize it, and you start leaving the old, this is what I've been hearing a lot lately too, is just that feeling of like, I cannot even imagine being that person anymore. And when you're there, when you're at that place where you can't imagine being that person anymore, the power of that is now you've changed. It's not something you're trying to do. A strategy is something that you're trying to do. I have to remember, how many of you who've been in a relationship, like you have to remember to do gratitudes with your partner. You have to remember to follow through with date night, right? Because it's a strategy. And until it's embedded in your identity, right, then it's work. But once you shift your identity, it's just like who you are. It's just what you do. And then it doesn't feel like so much work anymore. So identity is 80%. Strategy is 20%. If you want to make a dramatic change in your relationship, whether you're in a relationship, you know, I know in this space, I talk about how your marriage is your ashram. And I've been thinking about changing the name of this because it's really your life is your ashram. But I use your relationship as the mirror. It's the big mirror, whether you're coupled or not, right? It's the big mirror. And if you're not coupled, you look at your prior relationship or you look at how it is you want a relationship, and that's a mirror too. It's the coolest part of life. The coolest part of life. Life is mirroring to us constantly the thing that we need to be, that we're invited to work with. So 20% strategy, 80% identity. Something that you can start being aware of is what your 1.0 identity is. Notice those thoughts, notice those feelings, notice the stories you go back to, notice what those beliefs are. That's your starting point. What do you want instead? If you're interested in having a conversation about possibly working with me in my 8-week program, shoot me a DM or a private message. If you have any questions, post in the comments below. I hope you're doing well, taking very good care of your hearts, your families, yourselves, your lives, and I will look forward to seeing